Yo, what is up guys? I'm bringing you a brand new video, and this time we're talking about whether or not you're leaving rare items in the distance when you leave behind some loot beams while doing your grind rotation, and whether or not a player can actually steal that loot drop. And the important distinction is whether or not the drop from a mob is rolled upon killing the mob, or whether that drop is generated upon looting the mob. Because if the drop was generated upon looting the mob, then if you don't loot those beams in the distance, there's no chance that there is a rare drop over there that you left behind because you haven't yet looted it. But if the distinction is that once you kill the mob, then the loot is generated, well, then you definitely can leave behind rare drops. And this is a big question for a lot of pot piece grinders. They want to know, have you left behind that Kagtanak when you leave the loot beams at that one particular pack and move on to the next one? Is it more efficient to go pack to pack as fast as possible and leave behind a bunch of loot beams? Or is it better for you to loot every single mob in that area to guarantee that you haven't left behind anything? So the way that we're going to do this test is I went to Centaurs with a loot scroll popped, a gold loot scroll, and I killed a bunch of Centaurs. And as you can see in this picture, every single Centaur that I killed gave me 2 Centaurus mains. I then did the same thing with no loot scroll at all, and I killed a bunch of Centaurs, and I always got 1 trash loot when I had no loot scroll running. I also had no Agris running for both of these tests. And so what I'm going to be doing in this test here is I'm going to have my yellow loot scroll running. I'm then going to walk up to a mob, and I'm going to kill that mob, and then turn off my loot scroll. If you roll upon picking up, you would expect that if I had a loot scroll on and I killed the mob, then I turned it off, it would be that if I pick it up, it should be 1 if we assume that it's upon pickup, because I would at that point have no loot scroll running. Whereas if it's upon kill, then since the loot scroll was applied when I killed the mob, regardless of whether that loot scroll was on or off at that moment, I should be looting 2. And as you can see, I looted 2. So that means that the loot scroll was applying when I killed the mob, I turned off the loot scroll, I picked it up, it was still 2. That means that mobs are generated upon killing the mob, not upon picking up the loot. And I'll even run this test back in the opposite way. You can see that I will kill the mob with no loot scroll. Then I will turn on a yellow loot scroll, which should suggest that I would pick up 2 trash loot. But instead, I still only pick up 1 because the mob was killed when I had no loot scroll on. So loot is generated upon kill. I even went as far as making sure this wasn't an account-based thing. And what I did was I asked the help of a friendly adventurer that was grinding there. I turned on my yellow loot scroll. I killed a mob. He had no loot scroll running, and he had no Agris running. He then picked up the drop that I left on the ground, and he looted 2. If he generated his own drop from my loot pile, he would have only gotten 1 in that scenario because he had no buffs running. So it's without a doubt that loot is generated upon kill. And this means that you could potentially be leaving behind rare loot if you leave loot beams in the distance. You could have missed a pop piece, you could have missed a distortion earring, you could have missed all types of different rare drops if you're not fully looting all of your drops. And I know that that's a scary reality, and sometimes it will be more efficient to roll the dice and try to leave behind a loot beam or 2 if that means that you're going to be able to generate 5 more kills in that time. But my ultimate recommendation for you is if you're going for a very rare drop like the pop pieces, I definitely recommend manually looting the specific mob that you killed that does drop the piece. So if you're grinding at Bloodwolves, I would 100% always kill that pack, stand on top of that executioner, and make sure that loot pile is either looted by you manually or gone before going to the next pack. So that's pretty much the conclusion. And I'm happy that I did this test because I was a little confused about it as well. But either way, guys, that's the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for listening. and watching, and please subscribe. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.